Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 107 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. In this episode, we have a great interview lined up with XLR Industries, and really excited to have them on the show here and talk a little bit about the chassis, some of the hunting chassis that they have coming out, and just overall a great group of guys. So great interview coming up, along with some updates on the long range shooting school and some custom rifle building here at the end of the podcast. So without further ado, here we go. All right, before we get started, I would like to thank Krieger Barrels. Krieger is also a proud sponsor of the show and maker of world-class custom rifle barrels. They also have their new KriegerDirect.com. So you can stop over to KriegerDirect.com, order your barrel, and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So stop over to KriegerDirect.com, KriegerDirect.com. We would also like to thank TriggerTech. TriggerTech is also a proud sponsor of the show and maker of world-class triggers. So if you're in the market for a great trigger and you need it now, stop over to TriggerTech.com, where you can purchase rifle triggers for many aftermarket replacement triggers for your rifle, custom or otherwise. So stop over to TriggerTech.com, TriggerTech.com. All right, this is going to be a great podcast. Really looking forward to having these guys on the show, spend some time with them. A little bit longer than some of our podcasts, but just great information nonetheless. So without further ado, let's get this interview started with XLR Industries. All right, so with me today is Matt Means and Jaden Miller. They are from XLR Industries. I'm really excited to have them on the podcast here. We use them for our custom rifles. They have what I think is some really cool things going on inside the company, how they make their stocks. And this is just as exciting for me to have them on because I get to ask them all kinds of questions and hear more backgrounds on the company itself. So, Matt, Jaden, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Appreciate having us on.
Excellent. So, before we get started, a little bit of history about you guys and you guys' history with the company, and then I'd like to ask you a little bit about the company itself. So maybe introduce yourselves and what you guys do there, and maybe your history with the company.
All right. Well, I started at the company just a little over 5 years ago. I'm the sales and marketing director. XLR has been manufacturing chassis and rifle accessories since early 2010. So we just passed our 12-year mark in January. It's been a very interesting 5 years for myself. It's been the big growth of the company. You know, the precision rifle market, both in competition and hunting, has just really skyrocketed. And the whole firearms industry, you know, the last couple of years, it seems to be getting busier and busier. Jaden here is our sales rep, and Jaden, you've been with us
almost a year now.
Almost a year. So anyone who calls in or emails in, they're talking with Jaden, and he's kind of the go-to guy for all the info and getting people set up correctly with the chassis and what options they need. As far as company, I mean, our main focus are precision bolt-action rifle chassis, but we make a lot of different accessories that accommodate them and other things. In the beginning, the company was really originated just because Kyle, one of the owners, was trying to build an extreme long-range rifle chambered in .375 SHATAC using a Lawton 8000, I think it was, and there just really wasn't any options out there. So he started designing his own dream kind of stock, and it ended up being kind of a, you know, AR stock hybrid, and then started from there and posted pictures on forums, and next thing you know, people started asking for them. So the extreme long range and just more tactical side was really what originated XLR. And then it continued to progress to be more towards the, you know, modern day PRS and NRL competitions. And now we're getting heavily involved into the hunting industry, and the array of chassis and models we've made have really exploded. I mean, everything from aluminum to magnesium to brass and steel components, the different variants and models we cover now versus what we used to is really cool, just seeing a small business grow and continue to meet the demands of the markets. Jaden here has been heavily in the competition scene. What are you seeing right now with the competition and the chassis, Jaden?
It just seems like the chassis continue to grow in the competition side of things. Some of the features that you get whenever you're running those over a stock, it seems like it's pretty beneficial as far as the competition guys go. And so, I mean, you see there's a lot of components that keep coming out and just keep driving the competition scene even further and further to where it's getting way more competitive. I mean, last weekend, I think we went and there wasn't a target over 1.5 MOA. So guys are getting pretty darn good with rifles.
That's actually really awesome to hear, especially on the target size. So before I get into the next question, we do the same thing here at the shooting school. And what we found is as the students keep shooting better and better, and we have a test on day 3, we make the target smaller and smaller, and they just keep hitting them. So it's the old aim small, miss small. If you make the target smaller, people just aim better and hit it. That's actually really cool. Do you shoot the more PRS or NRL, or is it a mix of the two?
Oh, it's a mix of the two. So I really do everything. I do PRS, NRL 22, NRL Hunter. So, I mean, I string myself out pretty bad as far as only being able to hit 3 or 4 of each, but I like to shoot them all.
Well, with chassis history, what's sort of cool is we started in this industry sort of pre-chassis and has watched the evolution and revolution keep happening and making better and better products. So like pre-XLR, I think the only chassis that I can think of would be like the AICS when it came on the market, just for a 700 clone. And the thing was, and I had talked to some stock manufacturers about this, was, well, the chassis are never going to catch on. And then all of a sudden here comes some chassis in the market, and they're starting to sort of get into the tactical side. And now the evolution is into the hunting world. And we were just talking about it today. We had a customer come in that's 60-some years old, had his mind made up on what molded stock he wanted, and left ordering an XLR chassis, which many times has happened over the past couple of years. So what did you guys see? Like, I mean, you started in the industry early. What was it like to break into the chassis industry in the early years? And what have you guys learned along the way to make them as good as they are? Because making a hunting chassis is quite different than making a tactical chassis, because then the weight becomes the issue.
Well, I mean, for us, I think for the first couple of years, it was, just living the American dream of being able to just produce as orders were coming in, is very small scale. But as more and more images started getting out there on forums and word of mouth and people seeing them at their local ranges, the demand just continued to grow. And the niche for XLR and similar chassis manufacturers was that it was an accessory, it was an upgrade for their factory Remington or Savage or Howa, where like some of the previous options you mentioned, like Action International, you really couldn't get stock chassis hybrids is what I would call them back then, because they weren't even like full aluminum. They had like skins on them, and you had to buy the complete system. Where now you're seeing a lot more tailored towards complete rifles and, aftermarket options. You look at all the big rifle manufacturers, and everyone now is getting into the chassis game. So it's just really become the modern demand for any sort of platform. The hunting market's been very interesting because we had people using them hunting for many years prior to us really putting focus towards it. Those individuals just valued certain characteristics that the chassis offered that they couldn't get in a stock, whether it be precision fitment for them or family members. Like we had a lot of people using them as a family system so that they could get different kids and their wives or husbands set up on it. For some, it was they weren't trying to build the world's lightest weight rifle. They wanted the most accurate rifle because they truly were shooting at longer ranges before maybe long range hunting was a trend. And then like just, the folding buttstock is a huge selling factor. So we started noticing that, the people that believed in the systems and continued to buy them for their hunting rifles, their major complaint was just, oh, it would be nice if it was lighter, but what I'm getting out of it now is worth the additional weight. It's like, well, what if we could make it lighter and have all those benefits? So that's where we dove into the magnesium element, and we went through redesigns and different materials and just tested everything we could to make it light, but still have all the benefits of the chassis for modularity and accessorizing, and then just being a very rigid and accurate platform. There's no point in making something so light and flimsy that they can't shoot accurately with. And for us, like, we're still continuing to push more and more into just a true precision market where it's not, some of the chassis manufacturers that make stuff for little 1022s or some of the cheaper factory bolt actions. We are looked at as more of the high end tier. So everything we do is trying to make sure that it's 100% what we and anyone else would want to run in the field with their dream hunting or match rifle or even tactical. Like, we still do some stuff on the tactical side. We have the Homeland Security contract for the Border Patrol, and we work with some of the different special forces groups and plenty of law enforcement agencies. So it's nice every day not knowing what and who you're going to deal with, so you have to be really well-rounded to talk to all these different types of customers to meet their needs and demands. And that's exactly what the chassis is it can be tailored to any one of those specific shooting disciplines or end uses. An Element is a great example. We can have it be 28 ounces complete system, and we can have it be as heavy as 7.5 pounds. We can have it tailored to accept night vision and thermal clip-ons, or, different types of bipods and tripods. And, they can change it overnight, whether they're going to go shoot a competition or go to a law enforcement training. It's not, I have to get a whole new rifle. So, for us, like, it's just been quite the ride. And really, we've continued to just follow the market and see where the demand is needed, where I think some of your stock manufacturers have been really specific to just, this is a hunting stock, but we made it somewhat tactical with adjustable cheek rest, and that's all they did. Where, we've covered not every aspect of a precision rifle you could do.
Well, the one thing you brought up that I love to hear this stuff is when people say, it's sort of how we build our rifles here, even with the hunting rifles, is we won't sacrifice the accuracy for any additional weight reduction. So we make them as light as we can, but we always know that we don't want to go past a tipping point that we start to wear or tear the accuracy weight. And so when you brought up the accuracy first part, that's huge. And I noticed one thing on your chassis, and we had talked about this earlier, was your inletting is different than most chassis. And this is going to be a twofold question. The first problem I had with chassis when they first come on the market is exactly what you're saying. Like, when they tried to make the lighter ones, they made them so flimsy and chintzy, trying to level up your bipod and the forearms twisting. And it's almost like shooting a spring type effect with the chassis bowing and flexing. And then you've got some chassis out there that I just talked about in the last podcast that you almost have like a pencil width contact rail system on the sides. That's all that's touching the action, and that doesn't help. And so we had talked about bedding, but you guys do something totally different. And the customer that looked at the stock today, I think that was sort of like his final decision, just when we started going over the internals of what you do to make sure that you're going to have that rigid lockup and really just let the rifle shoot as accurately as possible. So can you talk about your thoughts behind that and what you guys do differently on the inletting where the action goes?
Yeah, so one of the big parts about how we do our inlet is we do a multi-radial inlet. So what that does is it gives more points of contact than your V-block would, or even some of the guys that are doing stocks. It just gives more contact there. And so the nice part about that and us getting so much more contact is it truly is a drop-in system. So whether these guys are running Defiance actions or 700s, you're not going to have to bed it. And that's the nice part, is when you receive your chassis, you can just drop it right in, and you're not going to have to take it to a gunsmith to have them modify or bed that chassis. So that's one of the big features of the chassis.
And you're one of the only few people actually doing it. even AI switched to like a V block bedding system. And if everything's perfect and they don't create stress in the stock when they make it, it works. But if there's any stress in the stock, if the action is warped or out of round a little bit, then that creates a lot of heartache. And you'll see it in the accuracy of the rifle. So kudos to you guys for not taking the short way out and just milling everything out of there. How about the webbing up front? Here's one that I liked a lot on it. When you look at your forearm, let's just talk about the Element for a minute. You guys didn't just hog everything out. I mean, you strategically left bracing or cross webbing throughout the front to make it light, but then it's still rigid as hell. And it looks like you can even add weights to it.
Yeah, we've changed designs many times throughout the different models, and even within the different iterations of specific models like the Element. The Envy would even be a better example, like some of the original Envies we manufactured, catering towards the demand of the competition market at that time. Like they had some very unique rigidity walls running throughout the barrel channel that actually were even more structurally sound. But then as the competition market continued to evolve and demand more weight, and then more weight turned into more tunable weight where you could really fine tune the balance of the rifle, some of those designs we couldn't continue to use. So we had to alter those rigidity walls to then allow it to accommodate bolt-in weights in the forend of the barrel channel. And in doing so, even though those previous rigidity walls were structurally more sound, just similar to the example earlier with the hunting rifle not making it too light to sacrifice accuracy, it was like, well, where can we then change the design to re-add that rigidity back into it? And so like on the MV Pro, if you were to have it next to any of the 4 previous generations of the Envy, you would see a lot of differences. You would see the wall thickness changes and the provisions for different types of night vision thermal clip-ons or, heat shields. And all of it really works as a complete system. So, we definitely would notice any sort of flaw in the market. We've been first to market with certain ideas, and we've had plenty of our competitors be first to market, and it's just a constant battle. And when someone designs something that the market's demanding, more often than not, what we see is all the companies are working at it at the same time. Some just might be faster to market, and if someone does something, you're not necessarily trying to copy them, but you can learn from their mistakes. So some of the other options that like you're probably kind of mentioning or hinting at is, they would just wallow out and make this big empty forend, which then might accept weights, but then opens up that rigidity issue. So it's like, all right, well, how can we improve on that to where we're still meeting the demand of that modular or, tunable weight system, but not sacrifice something? And that's truly like a business model we've stuck to. I mean, you look at like the adjustable DBM, for example, like we by no means were the first to market on that. They've been used for years. I mean, I'm sure there was someone prior to Jay Allen, but I think Jay Allen was one of the first I was aware of many, many years ago. Mm-hmm. But there's always been different flaws of different systems. Some fix one issue, but then cause a different issue. So like that adjustable DBM we've worked on for probably 2.5, 3 years. It's multiple different prototypes and designs. And, we take something that someone might be doing and say, all right, what's wrong with this and how can we improve on it? And then there's certain things we've done where it's like, how can we create it completely new that no one's done that? So like on the Envy, like the Element and the Envy used to run the same type of side weights or M-lock side weights. And they have different design features. But as the Envy continued to evolve into the competition-specific chassis, it was like, well, let's have the side weights not only add weight, but let's have them be designed to benefit the shooter's hand when they're shooting in different positions. And let's have it where no matter what length of arm the shooter has, if they're taller or shorter, they can always access those weights. And let's have them drop down lower to where they make contact with bags when they're shooting off different props and barricades. So when you start combining all these things, you mentioned to start off the rigidity walls in the barrel channel. It just all leads to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, creating that system. And that's what we both, Jaden and myself, really try to get across to all different customers is, how they can build the system to work for them. And it's not just a part, where that's kind of what a stock is, right? It's a single part that you're just bolting on, where the chassis is multiple things combined, creating this system. And when I'm sure for you, Jamie, when you're at your shooting school talking with students, I'm sure that's how you break down precision rifles, where quality scope on a poor rifle makes a flawed system. A quality rifle with a poor scope makes a flawed system. So we take that approach with the chassis, where we can't sacrifice any one part or area of it as much as we can. I'm sure there's always going to be, different opinions or specifics that someone's like, I wish you did this a little different, but we usually have a good reasoning why we might have done it a certain way. And it's usually to cover the masses.
It's funny you brought up the yin and yang effect too. So I've often found is, you're trying to focus in and pick out the weakest spots of the rifle, and you're trying to address them. And then the unforeseen flip side of it is sometimes there's a yang to it that you didn't expect it to play that well. So it's like this balance or trade-off that every time you try to fix something or move something, you always have to be careful of what's it going to affect, or what kind of a negative effect is it going to cause as well. But one of the things I find interesting, especially like XLR is a great example of, most of the people that are innovators in our industry were either trying to solve problems or trying to make something better, and a lot of times just really for their own personal reasons. And it just turned out that there's a market for it. They were trying to solve a problem that other people probably had the problem too as well. So companies that look at it and start that way are usually the innovators and leaders, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. With the students, I know, Jamie, you and I have talked about it. When you are trying to get rifles set up for your students, you're trying to make sure you're having a rifle that's not going to work for just one student, which I think would be a good segue into like our butt stocks. We've obviously focused a lot on the chassis and the forend of the chassis, but majority of our customers for many years, even with a lot of our older butt stocks, have always just fell in love with our systems because of the butt stocks, because they find the importance of that perfect fitment, the main interface between them and the rifle, which is, the butt stock and the grip. But while you've had these systems, like, what are your thoughts on the butt stocks you currently have, which would be the TR2s? And then you've gone some of the carbon butt stocks or some of the lightweight builds too, right?
Oh, absolutely. So you're nailing so many cool points, because it really is like that's where you interact with the rifle, the butt stock. And oftentimes, people pick out the stocks because it's got this cool factor, or it just looks good on the internet. But where you hang on to that rifle and how you connect to it. And I always tell guys, if you're going to shoot beyond 700 yards, that rifle has to fit you perfectly. And it really is all about the butt stock. And the XLR 4.0 Element with the carbon buttstock and that tiny little bag radder, that carbon, that is my favorite thing. Like this one accessory that just makes it spot on, that the rifle's not out of place to run to 1,000 yards. I mean, you can set and you can shoot it. Yeah, I mean, there's so much involved in that and trying to design that contact point. And I think like when you pick a rifle up, that's what you feel. You pick up the grip, you get the buttstock, you put it to your face, you put it to your shoulder, and how's it feel? That's so important to so many customers.
Yeah, the other cool part about that too, I just got off the phone with the customer before this, was with kids, there's not very many options out there for the kids. And so that's the nice part about the TR2, is it does have a length pull adjustment from 12 to 15 inches. And so you can drop it all the way down, and you can go even shorter than that, because we do have options to accommodate for our folding adapter. And so actually you can go all the way down to 10.5 inches. And you got to start watching for bolt clearance once you're down that low, but it fits the kids really well. And so that's what I tell a lot of guys, that is, you no longer have to have kids grow into a rifle. You can now let that rifle progress as they grow.
And they can change the buttstock size as the kid gets older, or the length of pull, and get it fitting them properly as they keep growing into it.
Exactly. And that way they're always going to be more comfortable behind it, and they're going to shoot a lot better if they do have a rifle that does fit them.
Oh, hands down. At the school, it's everything. Like the first day at the school here, we spent so much time, because we rent rifles to guys that aren't prepared, and we spent so much time fitting them. And I tell the students all the time, like, ask 15 times, adjust this a little bit, because sometimes they're a little shy to, if we adjust the length of pull, and then like, they don't want to ask to take it back. We're telling them, no, like, you ask 15 times, because if you really get that rifle set up really sweet to shoot, you're going to enjoy the daylights out of it for the next 3 days, but you have to get it adjusted right. If you're always not quite sure, it's not quite perfect, you're going to be a little fidgety and fussy with it, and you're just not going to run it as well. So first day of the school is just constantly making these small adjustments, adjusting the cheek piece, adjusting the length of pulls, and getting them really dialed in with the rifle, and then off to the races they go.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the other big part about the chassis too, is, I mean, a lot of the stocks, all you have as far as adjustments go is your cheek piece height, and then some of them have a length pull adjustment. The TR2 buttstock, it also has recoil pad height and recoil pad cant too. So if you want to put some cant in that recoil pad, and that way it'll fit around your, say, shoulder to pec joint there. I'm not sure that's not really the right term for it, but that way it really fits in there and it really feels good. I mean, I still mess with my stuff every once in a while just to kind of see if I can get it to feel a little bit better. And it's always changing it and feeling how it feels.
Well, to go back to the Element 4.0, I played with it all spring, and it is now set to 22 Creedmoor, completely all kitted out. People can check it out on Facebook. I put some pictures of it up. But I said that the chassis are going to take over soon, and they're going to start taking the market share for the hunting place, and for all the reasons that you're talking about. And then when you get companies that are passionate about doing it right, it really helps us, the shooters. It's where the rubber meets the road. And now, what was the deal with magnesium? Because you got to explain to people the difficulties of machining it, because there is some real serious precautions you got to take. But what got you guys to go down that route and start making out of magnesium?
Well, again, we were just going over as many options as possible to where we could save weight, but not completely sacrifice what we stood for. And I don't even remember exactly how the magnesium was stumbled upon, but I think it was just really looking over the options of different materials. And, we were even looking at doing things like some of the, older Action Internationals or J. Allen's, where they had skins on them and, less material of aluminum and more polymer plastic on the outside, which could potentially save some weight. And just going through those different types of materials, we came across magnesium that's 30% lighter than aluminum. Now, there's different types of magnesiums, just like there can be different types of aluminums. The specific magnesium that we use is AZ61A. And yeah, it's like 29.8 some change percent lighter. So, our Gen 1 element, which we haven't produced for quite some time, I think just the chassis block originally was around like 38 ounces for most of the action inlets. It can vary by action inlet just because the amount of material surrounding the actions, obviously, growing or shrinking. So as we were reducing the amount of material and changing the different skeletonized reliefs on the aluminum version, we got that down to 22 ounces, which is pretty light. But by the time you add the buttstock and the grip on there, depending on which options you choose, it's still a little on the heavier side comparative to most of the, lightweight hunting stocks. So the magnesium dropped the chassis block from 22 ounces down to 16 ounces, which then when coupled with the carbon buttstock and the carbon grip, you're at 28 ounces, which was really the mark we were trying to hit. Myself, I'm a pretty avid hunter, and I knew for us to be competitive in the hunting market, we needed it to be sub 32 ounces. So that was kind of the goal to hit. It just worked out that we hit that 28 ounce mark, which when used with the folding adapter, it goes up to 32 ounces. So having a 2-pound folding system that also has an adjustable cheek rest and, for most people, not all, everyone's got different preferences or builds, but, for a lot of people, it's a lot more ergonomic. And then you're getting, the rigidity. When you compare that specific chassis system that's 28 to 32 ounces to a stock that might even be lighter, those stocks that are lighter usually do have more fore-end flex. They usually are less adaptable to different situations where the chassis is going to overcome that. If they're going on a hunt that they need to shoot from a tripod or use different types of bipods or slings, it's very user friendly, where we've all known the customer or friend that's decided they want to start using, let's say, like a Javelin bipod, and they go to modify their stock to accommodate it, and they crack it dead down the forend because they're, not drilling or using a Dremel usually incorrectly. So, it sucks when you have someone call you saying, man, I just ruined my $500,000, $800,000 stock because they had to try to modify it with a drill or Dremel, and they didn't want to take it to a gunsmith, where a chassis, you really can't do that. And there's, at that time when we released it, there was nothing on the market that was that light and folded. And that's probably the biggest selling feature. I mean, anyone who's packed through alders or oak brush, anything that's thick, especially when they're hauling meat out and they want to be hands-free, be able to strap that rifle to your pack and lose 10 and a half, 11 inches of the overall length, that's a pretty big deal. So it's, it's been quite the ride for sure. The magnesium worked out amazing. As far as manufacturing it, we went and just, did all the research and took all the precautions. It's funny because some of those precautions, we were getting misled by some poor information. So we even have specific sensors on the machines that will notify us that there's any specific gases being released, which would happen if certain types of magnesium were to be sitting in any fluid like water and coolant for too long of a period of time. And then after, I don't know, close to a year of manufacturing, we came to find out that AZ61A would actually not even do that. So we even put some money into some safety steps for the machine operators that were unnecessary, but there's still stuff that you have to be, cautious about. Like the biggest thing would be it can catch on fire. Machining it, it's very unlikely unless you were to have a tool spinning next to the material and just constantly and not moving and getting coolant. And if it was dry, then it would cause enough friction to do that. Cerakoting coating, there can be some cautions, mainly on the blasting and the prep work, but most applicators have dealt with it, or even titanium and similar stuff where they just know they have to use specific media and blast out a lower PSI, but it's relatively safe. We always have customers joke with us like, hey, is this just going to, combust into flames, or kind of whittle away little pieces of it for emergency fire starter?
There we go.
Well, yeah, definitely could, but we haven't, to be honest, actually tested any of that part. We've always joked that we want to take all the machine chips that we recycle to, have some big bonfire, but we've yet to do that.
Oh, that's too good. Well, what about the inlets? So I married my personal rifle with an aluminum bat action. So that's called the Bumblebee, that locks in there with a flat bottom, which is incredibly stiff. So when I say that legitimately takes a hunting rifle that you could go and throw on the ground in a 22 Creed and shoot to 1,000 yards and it not be out of its place, right? But one of the things I'm stupid excited about, and I'm going to have Jaden chime in on this one since he said he shot the 22 League, is getting one of your Elements. I already got it on order for my CZ to make a 22 trainer with my hunting rifle. I mean, I find that to be the coolest thing on the planet of some of the stuff that you can do. So, Jaden, talk a little bit about the 22 long rifles here. I mean, I just think it make an awesome trainer, and the fact that I could take my specific hunting rifle and I could buy a CZ or one of the inlets for a 22 caliber, 22 long rifle, and I could actually turn it into a functioning twin in 22 long rifle.
Yeah, I mean, the 22s, everybody laughs about them, and it is silly because we are putting this much money into them, but they're so much fun. And so personally, I went with one of the Bergaras, and I did that just because it is on the 700 footprint. But any of the 22s are super fun. I mean, we're reaching out to 500 yards with those, and most of them are shooting MOA to sub half MOA. We have one Bergara that, it just shoots lights out. So it's a great way to get out there and practice all the fundamentals that you're going to be using with your centerfire rifle, but for a lot cheaper. You don't have to reload. And that's one of the nicest parts about those. So and then being able to make them match your centerfire platform. So it is all familiar feel with it. I love them, and we shoot those more than we shoot the centerfire, it seems like.
Yeah, we're going to set up a specific course here. We've been blessed. We have a couple ranges, and a friend of ours built up almost like an obstacle course, unknown. So you walk through and targets just appear and you have to shoot them offhand, kneeling, all these different positions. But we're working with them to try to set it up for either 22 long rifle or something that, out to 300-400 yards, really challenging to win, challenge your skills. But just, you don't have to reload and you're not wasting your components, because let's face it, right now, that's sort of a tough thing to deal with on its own.
It is, and it's even tough to find the quality 22 ammo, because I don't know what you guys are shooting, but personally, I know I shoot a lot of the Lapua Center X or the Midas Plus, and that it's hard to find, especially with how big NRL 22 is getting. And that's the biggest thing that I've noticed going from the 22 to centerfire is your wind reading skills. They get so much better. We went to a big match down in southern Utah, and the guys were planning on it being just a couple mile-an-hour winds. Well, it ended up being 15-mile-an-hour winds. But we're shooting MOA to 2 MOA targets at 400, 500 yards, and they're doing it just fine. Like 25% hit ratio. But it was pretty impressive to see what those 22s could do in that kind of weather.
Yeah, and just learning to set and shoot prone or slung, just removing all the other elements as far as like the recoil and caliber and your hunting rifle, but mirror your gun and just be able to set and practice and quietly. One of the beauties of the 22 long rifle is suppressed or not, they're not rip-roaring guns where it's a nice quiet session. And yeah, the first time I ever seen a rimfire run to 500 yards, I didn't believe his name was Alan Glass. He's a local gentleman here. We built some rifles for it. I was like, what? He's like, yeah. He said, come on out. So I went out, and I swear the lead streaks were going down almost like somebody drew a line down the plate. But he would shoot, and I'd pull my earplug out, and you'd wait, and you'd hear that little clink. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So we walked down and looked, and no kidding, I would have never guessed that they could shoot that far.
Yeah, it's super impressive. And I got a couple buddies that they put cans on theirs, and that's when it really gets impressive. It seems like all you can hear is the sear fall whenever you're running those.
Yeah, and the lead slap the target. You hear that
yeah,
walk.
Exactly.
Well, what do you guys got coming out for this year? I know you got some new adjustable buttstocks that we're excited about to get in here. And anything you can talk about or anything you want to talk about or that you're allowed to talk about of what's coming up for this year?
Yeah, the biggest one, as you're aware of, is the C6 buttstock. There has been some complaints with some guys that don't really like the TR2 because it doesn't have a toolless adjust. So what we've done is we came out with the C6, which it'll still have options to accommodate for the folding adapter, since that does add 1.5 inches of length pull. And so I've been running that for a couple months now, and it's super cool. You have 1 inch of length of pull adjustment, then you have cheek piece height, you have recoil pad height, and I think it's 1.4 inches of recoil pad height adjustment that you have there, so you can still make sure you get a super precise fitment for yourself. And then the part that I really liked about the new buttstock is the cheek piece cast, and so you can actually cast that off. I believe it's almost 1/8 of an inch of adjustment, or 3/8 of an inch. I apologize, but that just really allows you to get a really nice sight picture, and so you can really get a good alignment with that.
And as far as the C6 availability, is it out now? And can guys order it now?
It isn't out now, so it's going to be another couple months. We're transitioning it onto the production machine right now. Most of the ones that you're seeing out, they were done on our prototyping machine. So we're working on getting that out right now, and then we're hoping here in 2 months we should be able to have them on the website available in stock.
Well, I forgot all about the Bagheera, so I might have to put you on hold after the podcast here and say, hey, I think we should get one of those on order too. But the 22 long rifle was just an amazing, and I find it amazing you guys took the time to do it, because, when you look at all the manufacturers that are making all the different chassis, they often overlook some of these really cool little niches that as shooters, people that enjoy just the love of marksmanship, that's just not an option. And for years, a 22 trainer was impossible to get to be anywhere close to what your match gun was, unless you went out and bought a 40X, which of course they don't even make anymore.
Yeah, and it's a great way to get the kids or your wife involved too. I know that was that was something we've seen here on the local scene is we'll go out to the center fire matches, and it's great because it's just a bunch of guys out there shooting and we're all having fun. But whenever we go to the 22 matches, we got a few ladies around here that like to shoot those, and then we'll have 4 or 5 kids running around there, and they're just having a ball with those rifles. So it's a really good introduction rifle too.
Well, I can't thank you guys enough for all that you've done, and especially for coming on and taking time to the podcast. So we're going to be talking about stocks here. We've been working our way into a series of talking about breaking down the rifle and just how vulnerable the rifle is to every point, of every part and piece. The weakest link is what's going to cause you the issues, and the stocks have always been. And I mean, what you guys are doing, I mean, just kudos to you guys, just world-class stuff. I'm really enjoying the stocks here at the school. We have them on the line for students to demo. We have them here in the classroom. And then, like I said, I haven't changed my hunting stock forever just because I couldn't find the right one. It was just like, hey, fits me better. And the chassis weren't quite there yet. And we got the first Element here. And I have to say it's setting on my hunting rifle. It's just, I'm absolutely in love with it. This is a great, great piece of equipment.
Well, to have that coupled with that Bumblebee, like you said, that's a pretty amazing setup. Like, what more could you ask for as far as, tip of the spear technology on the action side and the chassis side of truly having superior components, which is everything we're talking about, right? You put all the different superior components together and you have a truly top performing rifle where then there is no weak link. The shooter will always be the weak link. And some of those parts help limit how much the shooter is going to be the weak link. And that's back to everything we were talking about, like that rigidity. You talk about adjusting the bipod. Well, sometimes it's also just shoulder pressure, like how consistent can you really apply the same amount of pressure into the rifle? And if you have that very, lightweight, minimalist stock that isn't very rigid, that barrel is just going to be torquing all over the place, which is going to affect the point of impact. So, I definitely envy you with your new hunting rifle because those bat machine actions, when we had them here in the shop, they're pretty cool. They're very neat.
Oh, Bat does a great job. And I mean, that's all we build on. And then we're using some IBI barrels, and IBI was just speaking with them today that they're coming out with their hunter class. So we think between the NV Magnesium, the Bat Bumblebee, and the new carbon that IBI, so we may be able to get a chassis gun in the 6-pound mark and close to breaking that 6 pound, which I find fascinating. I mean, that was an impossible thing to do 7 years ago.
Yeah, I'd imagine you should be able to hit it. I mean, we've definitely seen it. We've had them as light as 4 pounds, 14 ounce or 15 ounces, but those have been on some 16-inch 308s and super light actions that, usually are a little lighter than what most people are willing to run and or even willing to pay for. But on that bat machine action and a short barrel that's, a small contour, like for it to get sub 6 pounds, I would not be surprised because we definitely see them. But sometimes it's what are you losing to gain that? And we see the happy mark usually around that 7.25 to 7.5 for a lot of the popular chamberings and barrel length. So I think that's really the sweet spot. And you put a 20 to 26 ounce, long range scope. You're not necessarily putting a, 12 ounce, 2.5 to 8 scope or something. So, you do that and you put a good bipod on there and you still have a, 8 to 8.5 pound ready to go rifle. And that really is a perfect weight for me personally, as far as shootability. You go a whole lot lighter and you're just really losing a lot of that shootability and be able to spot your shots and truly usually just being accurate. Not a lot of people can shoot something with a decent amount of recoil, which a light rifle is usually going to have accurately. They're going to usually struggle with it. So you don't want to usually go too light. I always laugh when someone wants a sub 5 pound scoped rifle and I'm like, for what? 22 squirrels?
Yeah, and it's funny you brought that up because we've been talking heavily about that. Like the 22 Creed has become one of my favorites that, I mean, it literally delivers 1,000 foot-pounds of energy at 600 plus yards. And it's so mild that you now have that match-capable quality shooting rifle in a caliber that, so match shooters got it right. They went heavy and small. And hunters do just the opposite. They go light and big. And there's a reason why match shooters go heavy and small. Is recoil is not your friend for most shooters. They just can't handle it, or it wears them out too fast. So what's cool is they're both the transition of both the stock qualities of getting that super rigid quality stock that's capable of competing with the heavy chassis, but then calibers that are outperforming a lot of the sought after calibers. Like, just give you an example, like 30-06, right? A great caliber, but when you take modern bullet designs, modern propellants, modern case designs, and a 22 Creed at 300 yards, it's dimpling AR 500 plates with bullets that are designed to just penetrate and shred things. And now you've got the best of both worlds. You've got a rifle that you could compete with as well and shoot well and have fun with. So I agree. I mean, my personal gun is with the suppressor, and I have a Collis 3-18 and everything on it. I'm probably getting close to the 10-pound mark, but I didn't go magnesium. I gave the magnesium stock up to a customer that wanted it, so I took the aluminum. But that said, though, you got it right. I mean, it's amazing how many people don't bring this conversation up, but I truly believe everything that you're saying. It comes from someone with experience when they're making comments like that, because there's a huge price to pay on the other end of that when you go super light and then you want to build a big caliber.
Yeah, we try to steer those customers in the right direction. Like when someone is trying to build a big 300 Norma or 300 Rum, it's not that they can't use the lightest weight components from us, but it usually benefits them if they were to use like the TR2 buttstock versus the carbon buttstock. That little additional weight, which it's around 12 ounces difference, and that additional fitment will make them that much more accurate and consistent behind the rifle. So yeah, we always believe in, depending on what their end goal is, tailoring that system. If they want to build an ultra lightweight little 22 Creed, sweet, let's do it. We can go as light as you want, because you're going to always be able to shoot that rifle accurately, to a certain degree, of course. But yeah, it's interesting to see those trends move up and down. It seems like people are coming back to the smaller side. Like you said, the benefit of all the progression and bullets and components. But I'm sure we'll see a big boomer craze again here in the next couple of years, and everyone's going to want to build the big 30s and 338s again.
Yeah. Well, we had a young girl come through, and she did just exactly what we're talking about. Built it in 6.5 Creed, though. She wanted to hunt elk with her dad. And it was amazing just to watch her with a rifle that she could carry all day, reasonably weight, brand new right out of the gate, zeroed the rifle, did a little bit of doping with her and fitting it, and ran the steel out to 700 yards. And that's not normal. I mean, and her to be 100% comfortable in the rifle, that really is what it's all about.
Yeah, it is. And it's pretty cool to see that. And obviously you have more experience with this as far as teaching the students and everything. But personally, I know my mom, she shot 300 Win Mag forever. And when I set her up behind my 6th Creed, it was just an eye-opening experience for her. Like, oh, I've been missing out on watching where my shots hit, or actually being able to control the recoil. So it's pretty cool to see that.
It is. Well, we should invite you back on. We'll set up a part 2 to this series later on. Maybe once we get the 22s here set up, maybe we'll get a chance to actually go out and do some shooting this summer and come out and visit, and just maybe go into a little bit on the shooting side of it as well, because you are competitive shooters and you get a lot of this stuff. So maybe bring you on and talk to you a little bit about, preparing for a match, preparing for a hunt, caliber selections, getting your stock set up properly, some things to think about, hunting in cold weather, hot weather, all that good stuff. So I'd like to invite you guys back on, but I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast and talk a little bit about it. Super excited about the quality of products you guys are putting out. Definitely top tier. And like I said, I like them so much. My personal hunting rifle is setting in it right now, and I haven't changed that in probably 15 years. So kudos to you guys. But thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
No, I think we covered a lot of great stuff, and we do appreciate you making the time to have us on too, Jamie. We look forward to continuing working with you and getting products sent your way for the rifles you're building, and the shooters and students that you're helping get set up on all this stuff. And would love to discuss more in depth on the systems, but even just like you said, talk about getting stuff set up for hunting season or certain specific matches. I mean, yeah, Jaden could ramble on forever, I'm sure, on 22 stuff. So once we get that CZ chassis over to you, we'll do maybe a 22 specific series. And it's amazing when people hear what can all be involved in that in regards to different ammos and lubes and cleaning procedures. So always something to talk about.
Oh, that sounds great. And that's a great plan. I think that would be awesome to come on and talk about some 22 trainers and just what you can really do with them. So, Matt, Jaden, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. I really enjoy it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie.
Well, there you have it. What a great interview. And I want to thank those guys for coming on again to this show. Really enjoyed having them on. The 22 CZ I'm building up with the Element 4.0. I'm really excited about that as well, because when I took it out to get everything zeroed up here and I was telling my wife the project I was working on, she went with me and she started shooting. And we're doing the same thing with some high-end air rifles as well, try to incorporate them into some types of training that we can do here that guys can go out and learn and practice some skills without burning up their hunting rifle or match gun, and really just an alternative to the ammunition and everything else that we're, everybody's struggling to get, and allow you to get lots of good trigger time. So lots of cool stuff coming up. I do want to take a couple minutes and say thanks for everybody for joining us here on the podcast. It's a little bit longer than we normally do. We do have some cool updates. We do have a couple slots open for our long-range shooting school. They just had a few slots open for the fall. So if you're interested, I think we have 4 slots now available for the year. Just people transferring and moving and attending different classes. So if you're interested in joining us here, we'd love to have you. You can stop over to wolfprecision.net and log on to the long-range shooting school there. Also, if you have any questions or anything you'd like us to tackle here on the podcast, drop us a line, send us an email, and if we read your question on the air, we will send you a t-shirt or hat as our way of saying thank you. Next week, we're going to continue on our custom rifle or rifle series, and we're going to start talking about the accuracy of a rifle, and we're breaking the rifle down to its core components. So we're going to have part 2 of that series coming up next week, and it's going to be all on optics. So look forward to having you join us. It's a great topic, and there are lots of things to take into consideration when you're selecting this piece of equipment for your rifle. So looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you are listening to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.